Friends, we need to talk about canals. Specifically, the Panama Canal, that 50-mile marvel of engineering connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. You see, it seems former President Trump has decided to add international maritime law expert to his already crowded resume. Just this week, he declared his intention to take back the Panama Canal, claiming China is now running the show. Now, I realize this might sound like the ramblings of a man who thinks the Suez Canal is where you buy discount khakis, but unfortunately, it's a tad more complicated than that. You see, Panama has this thing called sovereignty. It's like when you order a pizza, and you expect it to arrive without someone else taking a bite out of it first. Panama owns the canal, they control it. End of story. Not surprisingly, they weren't too thrilled with Trump's suggestion that they'd misplaced their keys to the kingdom. They politely reminded him that the canal wasn't his up for grabs, no matter how many times he yells, "Finders keepers." Now, I understand why Trump might be confused. He's used to operating in a world where he believes everything is transactional. But international relations aren't quite the same as buying up casinos and slapping your name on them in giant gold letters. You can't just waltz into a sovereign nation and claim their most prized asset because you're feeling nostalgic for the days of Teddy Roosevelt's big stick diplomacy. Well, you can, but it's generally frowned upon. This brings us to the crux of the issue, the 1977 Torrijos-Carter Treaties. This isn't just some dusty old document you find in the back of a library, smelling faintly of mothballs and regret. It's the legal backbone of the Panama Canal's operation. The treaty, signed by President Jimmy Carter and Panama's General Omar Torrijos, officially handed over control of the canal to Panama, ending decades of U.S. control. Now, I know what you're thinking. John, are you saying that America just gave away a canal? Well, gave away might be a bit of a simplification. It's more like we realized that holding on to someone else's property indefinitely wasn't exactly a good look. Plus, the treaty included a provision allowing the U.S. to intervene if the canal's neutrality was ever threatened. And by threatened, they didn't mean someone cutting in line for a passing cargo ship. This is where things get a bit sticky. Trump, in his infinite wisdom, seems to believe that China's growing influence in the region constitutes a threat to the canal's neutrality. His evidence? Well, it's mostly based on his gut feeling, which, let's be honest, has about as much accuracy as a magic 8-ball after a few too many cocktails. See, China's been investing in infrastructure projects in Panama, part of their Global Belt and Road Initiative. And while it's true that China's no stranger to playing geopolitical chess, there's no concrete proof that they're planning to weaponize the Panama Canal for their own nefarious purposes. Enter Marco Rubio, the current Secretary of State, stage right, with a briefcase full of diplomatic pleasantries and a furrowed brow that could rival a Shar-Pei puppy. Rubio, in a move that can only be described as refreshing when compared to the diplomatic stylings of his predecessor, actually engaged in diplomacy. He met with Panamanian President Laurentino Cortizo and Foreign Minister Santiago Cafiero, not to issue threats or make outrageous demands, but to, talk. Rubio, to his credit, expressed U.S. concerns about China's influence while acknowledging Panama's right to manage its own affairs. It was a delicate dance, like trying to navigate a minefield in stilettos, but he managed to avoid any major diplomatic faux pas. The Panamanians, for their part, were keen to reassure the U.S. that they weren't about to hand over the canal keys to Beijing. They even offered to audit the Panama Ports Company, a company with ties to China that manages some of the ports around the canal. Now, some might see this as a sign of weakness, a kowtowing to American pressure, but I prefer to see it as a pragmatic move by a nation caught between two squabbling elephants. Panama knows that maintaining good relations with both the U.S. and China is crucial for its economic well-being. They're not picking sides. They're just trying to keep the canal flowing and the cargo moving. Because the Panama Canal isn't just some ditch in the jungle. It's a vital artery of global trade, a maritime superhighway that carries billions of dollars worth of goods every year. Everything from cars to coffee to computers passes through its locks, and any disruption to its operation would send shockwaves through the global economy. Think of it as the circulatory system of international commerce, and right now, it's got a bit of a blockage. This whole kerfuffle highlights the growing rivalry between the U.S. and China. It's like watching a Cold War sequel, only this time, instead of stockpiling nuclear weapons, we're competing for influence, investment opportunities, and yes, control over strategic waterways. And while a full-blown conflict is hopefully unlikely, the potential for miscalculation and escalation is very real. So what's next for the Panama Canal? Well, if history is any guide, it's likely to remain a focal point for international intrigue, economic competition, and maybe even the occasional diplomatic spat. One thing's for sure, though, this isn't just about Trump, and it's not just about China. It's about the future of global trade, the balance of power, and the delicate dance of international relations in an increasingly interconnected world. And that, my friends, is a story that's far from over.